The OCD and Anxiety Podcast by Robert James Coaching. Hello and welcome to the OCD and Anxiety Podcast, where we explore how to have a more positive relationship with anxiety disorders, taking back control so that you can start living the life you choose and not the one chosen by your fears. Hello, all you people, and welcome to episode 3 of the OCD and Anxiety Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Nick Thomson, the writer of the OCD short film For Want of an L. It's a really good film, and I highly recommend that you check it out. The interview covers lots of different areas about OCD. Remember, if you'd like to know more about the coaching services I offer, please do feel free to get in touch. And I really hope you enjoy today's show. Many thanks. Okay, welcome to the show, Nick. Fantastic for coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Nick is the writer of the up-and-coming short film about OCD, For Want of a Nail. So first of all, Nick, I just wanted to ask you, what was the inspiration for the film, and have you suffered OCD yourself?
I have OCD myself, and there were two main reasons why I wrote the film. The first was that this was a few years ago now. I was recognizing that particularly the compulsions and the rituals were becoming more and more complex, and then what was required of them, what I was required to do to satisfy these compulsions, was becoming more and more intricate and more complicated. So therefore, it took more time. Then you got stuck in these loops. You see, and then that was becoming more and more of an issue. And then so it was like OCD was gaining power, and starting to take over too much. So I wanted to, obviously, you want to regain some power from it. And then one of the other things that really kind of fired me up to write this story was it was on BuzzFeed. I saw this on social media, and it was something that one of my friends shared, and it was a quiz called "How OCD Are You?" Right. And being that this was from BuzzFeed, I can't imagine it was very accurate. So I went on to this thing, and it was just a bunch of images of messy rooms with a rating system beneath it, 1 to 10. How triggered are you by this image? And I was like, well, this isn't OCD. I mean, this is like, what is this rubbish? And then I saw how people were reacting to that, and then thinking, oh, I've got OCD. Oh, so have I. Oh, so have I. But then it was weird because people were almost seeming to react as if that was like a good thing, as if it was something they could kind of show off on social media, make them look a bit different or a bit interesting. Something like that. So and then I just thought, well, this is this quiz, and there's been numerous ones. I saw one just the other day that was even worse. And so these are not representative of OCD at all. So I wanted to try and get a much more accurate picture of what it's like to actually have OCD.
Absolutely, I completely agree. There's so much misinformation about OCD, and there are a lot of people on social media who are maybe using OCD in a not very helpful way, and that it's really frustrating when you see that, because people who are really suffering, it kind of takes away from them and the experience that they're having. And we're trying to raise awareness of OCD in the right kind of way, and if it's not being done in the right way, then it's actually very counterproductive. No?
Exactly. Yeah. There's, the number of times that you see somebody say, "Oh, I'm a little bit OCD," or "That was an OCD thing," or the number of times you see somebody, if they've cleaned their house and they've given it a really thorough clean. I gave my house a really OCD clean, and it's like, no, you just cleaned your house. Stop sort of co-opting this.
Yeah, it's so annoying. It's so frustrating.
It's very annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, for want of a nail, how did you come up with this title? It's a proverb, no?
Yeah, it's I think my dad told me it years and years ago. It's like one of those things, and it sticks in your head because the original version of the originally there was an idea for a novella, then it became a short story, and it had different titles. Like one of the titles was Compulsion, but that was just it was too generic and on the nose. The next title after that was The Seventh Rub, which makes sense when you see the film, but the title sounds too much like a porn movie. So, uh, you know, so I thought, no, that's not a very good title. But
Yeah,
then I
might trigger some
remembered
people
about,
as well. Yeah.
yeah, but then I remembered about the For Want of a Nail sort of poem, proverb, whatever you want to call it. And it was just, it actually, it's very appropriate for what OCD is about. That it starts off with, there's a horseshoe, and a nail comes out, and then so the horse loses the horseshoe, you lose the horse, you lose the rider, you lose the message that they're carrying to somebody important, you lose the battle, then you lose the war, and it's all for want of a horseshoe nail. So just this idea of something very small having a big impact, so that it kind of comes into, one of the common things with OCD is the kind of fear of harm or even death being visited upon people that you care about, and then
Yes.
so you do these compulsions to try and stop that happening. So your compulsions. That's the kind of the nail, and the kind of the losing of the battle is the kind of the ultimate fear. You know.
That's really interesting. Yeah, really makes sense now. It's yeah, the heightened sense of responsibility that so many people with OCD have, and that coupled with this idea of like magical power or magical thinking of, if I don't rub this light switch 7 times in the right kind of way, then something terrible is going to happen to my grandmother or my brother or I don't know, whoever. But it's incredibly hard, incredibly difficult to deal with that anxiety and just to kind of allow it to be there. And it's portrayed really well, I think, by the actor in this film.
Yeah, Clark did a really good job. Because obviously I'd written the script, he had the script to go off, and then particularly when we were workshopping the script with a bunch of other actors, and we got a bunch of volunteers who came in from Mind and OCD Action and so on. So they worked with the actors, and were really able to again, it's that issue of translating it from somebody who has it to somebody who doesn't, so that they can kind of get into the mindset of it and then translate that again for the viewer. So
Absolutely.
Clark did a really good job.
Okay, so you had volunteers, so you had people coming onto set who actually suffered with OCD to work with the actor and to make sure it was being portrayed in a way that they felt was reflective of what OCD is truly like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because we had numerous people for the workshop, and then when we were actually filming it on set, we had Kasha Khan, who came on, and he's got OCD as well. So he was kind of the dedicated, on set volunteer that could deal with the actors, particularly Clark, in just providing just little bits of information or just little ways to maybe play the scene. Because obviously I was there on set as well, but then I was busy being script supervisor, so I was kind of busy with that most of the time. But I was able to chip in now and then. But it was really good to have Kasha there to be the dedicated person for that, to really kind of help guide Clark through all the little intricacies, because that's one of the things about OCD. It's very, very complex, and there's all these little intricacies, and it's different for each individual as well. Like it's not a very consistent thing. It's not a simple thing to understand.
No, that's exactly right. It's completely different for each person. Everyone has their own perspective and their own background and history, and OCD kind of is a thinking habit. It's a pattern or a style of thinking that changes over time. And I was going to ask you now about themes, because you kind of already mentioned kind of some of the themes that he had or has in the story. And themes are one thing that certainly for me, and I think for most people with OCD, they tend to kind of change and morph over time, and that's part of the complexity of the problem. So can you tell us a little bit more about the themes that Marty kind of deals with?
Well, with Marty, it's kind of sort of a reflection of myself and my own issues with OCD. So the main one for Marty is intrusive thoughts, which are, they're a good, they sort of cover everything, and they're always there. They're always in charge of things. But then there's numerous things, like there's checking, so it's windows and locks and particularly light switches in the case of the film.
Yeah.
And then there's also like the importance of objects, so it's trinkets, mementos, gifts, it's all about who those objects are connected to, the people in his life. So these things take on great importance with that. And there's elements of contamination worries, more, stuff from the outside, rather than to do with himself or within his own little world, because we mostly see him in his house, and that's kind of his little sanctuary, that he's kind of withdrawn into. I kind of explain it like with my OCD. It's kind of like a pick and mix, but there's not a jelly fruit in sight, so it's like you've got bits of this, that, and the other from all of these different pillars that kind of form the foundation of OCD in general. And some people will have, maybe the intrusive thoughts are very high, or maybe for another person, the contamination aspect is very high. And so it's these different levels, so it's lots of individual pieces, but the main driving force is intrusive thoughts.
Absolutely. Okay. And one thing that I really noticed throughout the film was this idea that Marty seems to have about perfectionism. And it's such a common theme in OCD. Maybe underlines a lot of OCD in general, is people are looking for perfection. Before I can kind of, relax and enjoy myself or be in this conversation with this person or whatever it is, I have to first get to the bottom of this thing, and I have to do it perfectly. And I think the film portrays that really well with Marty.
Yeah, it's part of the reason in writing the film as well was it was like a warning to myself, because as I mentioned earlier, I was noticing that particularly compulsions were getting more and more complicated and were demanding more and more of me. So in writing this film, it's kind of like a warning to myself in the future. It's like, don't end up like this, don't let it get to this state, So then writing the film brings the control back. So then part of this nightmare scenario, if you will, that the film presents is this idea of Marty pursuing the perfect day. So with rituals, they sort of manifest from nowhere, it seems. You could maybe do something that has no meaning. You maybe do it again, it has a little bit more meaning. You do it a third time, maybe not intentionally, and then all of a sudden now it's a ritual, and then things build upon those rituals. So with this pursuit of a perfect day, it's like been building for Marty over a number of years, and then it's become this thing now where it's like, in order to achieve his main goal, which is to quote unquote save his twin sister Mindy, in order to achieve that, he then has to do this perfect run throughout the day. It's like pure efficiency. And this is something he's kind of latched onto. And if he can just get through one day absolutely perfectly, he'll achieve the goal. Oh, that'll be, I've kind of I've done OCD, it's done. But of course, that's not how it works, but then it's almost like that's how OCD is making him think about it, to kind of trick him into doing it, because OCD it's a very manipulative kind of a condition. It makes you think all sorts of things and turns itself back on itself, and it twists every thought that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. And you mentioned there about the creative process itself being actually very helpful for you in dealing with your own OCD.
Yeah, it's in doing the film, because fortunately Ali Corson, who's our producer. She wanted, when she was looking for scripts, she was wanting to find a screenwriter who would be as involved as possible. And unfortunately, that was what I wanted to be as well. I didn't just want to sell a script and then move on. I wanted to be involved in the creative process. So in being involved in the project, that's required me to travel. And then it's like one of my recurring anxieties and issues is to do with travel, and it's this abject fear of unfamiliar places and getting lost and not being able to find my way home. So in having to travel for this project, you're going to unfamiliar places, you're having to drive somewhere on unfamiliar roads, going somewhere that you don't know, to meet people that you haven't met before. So these are all things that challenge you in different kinds of ways. You're staying over at somebody else's house, you're in somebody else's bedroom. This is it's an entirely alien environment. It's like wearing somebody else's shoes, when you're staying in somebody else's bedroom. It's you're out of your comfort zone. And the place where you have control, you could walk through your daily routine with your eyes closed, but then suddenly you find yourself in totally unfamiliar surroundings. So just the act of being involved in this film, it is good, because it pushes me to tackle some of these things. I mean, like particularly with the travel thing, anytime I've had to travel for this project, the anxiety and the worry about traveling usually begins about a month before I actually have to travel.
Wow.
And then it just ratchets up gradually.
Yeah.
And it's like the day before you can't sleep properly. And then, it's kind of like, that Adam Sandler movie Click, where he has the remote control that can skip past parts of his life. I kind of wish I had one of those. So you could, if I could just skip past the bit where I have to drive 4 hours on motorways, all the chaos, if I could just skip past that, that would be handy. But, but obviously you don't have that. So you have to do these things. You have to travel in order to get there, to do the thing that you want to do with the film. So it's been very helpful in trying to wrestle back some control from OCD itself.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it sounds like you're applying ACT or ERP to the actual creative process. These are the things that you really value. You value your creativity, your writing, supporting other people with OCD, and so you're focusing in on those things and the values that you care about, and making sure that you're doing those things despite the anxiety and despite the OCD that you're having about that. And when you have that approach, that is in my opinion, that's the best way to deal with OCD, is to try and take back that control. Like, don't let OCD force you to kind of like stay at home. It's like, no, like identify the things that you're passionate about and that you care about, and then focus in on those things and do those things and allow the anxiety to be there. Because when we keep doing that, although, as you just said, we all wish we could have a remote control to kind of take those difficult things away. It's like, unfortunately, we can't. We have to deal with it. But if we keep doing it over time, what's happened to me is I notice I get over time less anxious, bit by bit over the months and years. So it's worth doing. I think
that's exactly it, because in doing this, in being involved in this project, then I have noticed that there were certain compulsions or certain rituals that I did before that I now no longer feel the need to do, because it's like, in tackling this thing through a creative pursuit, then that's something that I can do. So I'm kind of using something that's inherent to myself, which is this creativity, screenwriting. So this is kind of my route into tackling my own OCD. It's really obviously there's always a long way to go, and there's always various other things you can do, but I've definitely managed to pull back some control and temper down certain things, so it's hopefully we can keep this project going, because we're pitching a television series adaptation of For Want of a Nail at the moment, so which would allow us to really expand upon the characters and the story and explore OCD in a way that's very different to how we do it in the short film.
Mm.
in a way that we couldn't really do on, with the compressed time and the small budget and so on. There's a way that's, because in the short film we use a lot of voiceover and breaking the fourth wall. So that's kind of telling the audience what it's like to have OCD. But in the television adaptation that we're pitching, I'm coming at it from a more dynamic angle, where I would be able to show the audience what it's like to have OCD, and really and represent it even more accurately, and really get into a lot of the nitty gritty with it. So this whole project has really has been a big help. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! That's really interesting to hear, and good luck with that. I really hope it you get some success with that. It would be great to see a TV series.
Yeah, I mean the stuff that we've been obviously I've been mapping out all of the episodes, and I've been writing some of the material for the episodes, and it really excites me a great deal, and I think it could be a really good television show, and I think it would make a really good story with characters that people could really get connected to, and then it would be also, particularly with the short film as well. The intention was to inform the audience about OCD, but then also entertain them in terms of the film itself. So it would be a film that they would enjoy watching, rather than it being some awful, dreary, serious, hand-wringing sort of issues film, which somebody would say, I've watched it, I'm never going to watch it again. With this, I would like so that it'd be something that people would enjoy watching, but then whilst they enjoy it, they actually learn something very valuable and really get an understanding of OCD,
Well, that's the thing, because obviously when you have OCD, it's sometimes it's incredibly hard to kind of, like to laugh and smile about it and kind of, because when we can do that, that's when we start to feel a bit better. But it's so hard to do sometimes. And if you can have a TV show that kind of shows OCD, but also shows like the kind of lightheartedness behind it as well, because it's difficult though, because like you don't want to like mock OCD. Like that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is saying, okay, like you have OCD, but like we can still kind of try to see like the ridiculous side behind it. Because really, when you really look at some of the things we do when we have OCD, there is like, it is ridiculous. It is like when you look at it from an objective point of view, or objective standpoint, and you really think like, what on earth am I doing? Like, why am I rubbing this like door 7 times? Or why am I worrying about like, my breathing or my swallowing, or like, and anything like hand washing, like it doesn't matter. It's kind of ridiculous in nature. And if we can kind of see the funny side of it, then it really helps us, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because I mean, particularly when it comes down to the humor aspect of For Want of a Nail, because I always wanted to make it absolutely clear that any of the humor in For Want of a Nail, none of it targets OCD. It's not about making fun of OCD or the people that have OCD. It's never about that. It's because really, I suppose in describing what the genre of the film, what type of film it would be a drama with a sense of humor. So it's not a comedy, because that would suggest laugh out loud funny, which that's not what this is.
It's not. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily light-hearted, because then that would suggest that it's flippant. So it's not that either. So it's more like, well, I mean, so I have OCD, but I also have a sense of humor. OCD doesn't stop me from having a sense of humor. So in turn, Marty has a sense of humor. And really, I mean, one of the common things with a sense of humor is it's like a shield. It's, you use it to protect yourself, or to get yourself, through a difficult time. I mean, on the battlefield, soldiers are cracking jokes. There's this awful situation that they're in, but they're cracking jokes. It's a way to cope with the situation. But then
and release the pressure.
Yeah, and particularly like with sometimes you see a drama on television, and then the characters are all in some very intense sort of story, and there's all this drama going on, and nobody ever cracks a smile, never mind a joke, never mind has a humorous observation about everything. It's like nobody goes through their life that utterly miserable. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not realistic. It's not a fully rounded character. So
yeah.
that was one of the things I wanted to do with Marty, is give him a sense of humor, and because also it helps balance out the more serious aspects of For Want of a Nail, so he can have a bit of humor there, so it keeps the tone balanced, because you don't want the audience to just be dragged down. You know, I want
Mm,
to have a bit of levity now and then, but again, it's the thing of the humor is always appropriately targeted. It's never at OCD. It's never mocking OCD or mocking anybody that has OCD, because I have it myself. Why would I want to
mm.
mock my own situation or the situation of other people?
Yeah,
But as I said, just because you have OCD doesn't mean you can't have a sense of humor as a person.
yeah,
So that
absolutely,
was one of the key
absolutely.
things about the film.
And that's interesting as well, because something I noticed about Marty throughout the film is he often gets emotionally like blocked, um,
Mm.
and when he does, it's like all humor goes out the window, everything goes out the window. He's blocked. He's not able to kind of communicate with the people in his life. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I suppose the interesting thing is that with OCD, you keep it secret. You know,
Mm,
to begin with, when you first start experiencing it, you don't know what it is. Like
mm,
in hindsight, I'm able to recognize that I started experiencing some of the issues with it when I was 8 years old. So I mean, that's a long time ago now, unfortunately. But anyway,
yeah,
um, so when I was 8 years old, that's when the first starts, the first rumblings of this got going. Like in the film, the character has this thing with, I call it the even touch. So it's like if you're touching a surface, then you've got to balance it out with your fingers. And I first noticed that when I was 8.
yeah,
So that you keep this secret because it's like, what is this thing? You don't understand it. It's an embarrassing thing. And then so you go year after year after year after year after year, not talking about it, not addressing it, not telling anybody about it. It's like this big secret. It's a big embarrassment. So in doing that, then you're not confronting that, because you don't necessarily know what it is that you would be confronting anyway. And it's only years later you start finding out, oh, wait a minute, this is OCD, I think. And then the more you investigate, it's like, oh, yes, it is OCD. And then you already know the public perceptions of OCD, the way it is kind of, casually tossed around, the way it is mocked, all this kind of stuff. So because of this thing of keeping it secret, then you're shutting it down, so you're not tackling it. So therefore, Marty's not really going to be all that great when it comes to face-to-face conflict
yeah, yeah,
with something. He's not used to expressing himself or being honest about OCD. So
yeah,
therefore, that also affects his dealings with other people. He just kind of and then also it's that thing of with OCD, the constant 24/7 fear of saying or doing the wrong thing.
mm,
And where else are you going to say or do the wrong thing than in the heat of a conflict? So it's so you just get shut down and you can't quite cope with this thing. So
yeah. It kind of leads into my next question as well, which is the importance of, you've just already spoken about it, but the importance of opening up and not keeping it a secret. Because obviously when we open up and we speak to people and we ask for help, that is when things start to get better. And Marty clearly struggles with doing that. And so it's part of the film to highlight the importance of that then.
oh, absolutely, yes, because when in the short film, when we find Marty in a very lonely place, and
Mm,
he's the only person that knows about this. Even the people that are closest to him, like family members and so on, they don't understand. Oh, that's just Marty, or they don't understand what's going on, because it's a very secret,
mm.
internal sort of a condition. So um, I really want people to understand OCD and how it works, because it's a very complicated sort of a condition.
Yeah, I
You know.
mean it's so frustrating. I think you can keep it secret and for a long time, and then finally you can open up and speak to someone about it. But unfortunately, if you speak to the wrong person and they don't understand OCD, then that can also not be particularly helpful. And other people, like clients that I've worked with, have even gone to the doctor and explained in detail the like pure O type OCD that they're having. And still, a lot of doctors don't necessarily understand OCD, and so the person gets told, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just thinking too much, or you're whatever." And I think that can be, really, really hard to take as well.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
there
yeah.
really is a. I mean, it's absurd that even in the medical profession, there seems to be such a lack of understanding of it. And it's like, even with your GP, and it's like, well, no wonder people don't want to go and talk to somebody about it, because really their first port of call would probably be their GP, who probably knows nothing about it. Particularly with medical professionals, but just the general public. Um, I think we generally have like a good understanding of, say, PTSD or postpartum depression, or things like this. I think the public have generally got a grasp of it.
Mm.
Even from a casual standpoint, they get the gist at least. So they have some understanding. Whereas with OCD, it's just year after year, it keeps being something that is just casually thrown around. People don't understand it. Maybe they don't even want to be bothered to understand. So, here's another thing I've got to learn about, and yeah, it's an absurd situation that we find ourselves all these years later, and the majority of the public just have no real understanding of what OCD is actually about.
Yeah,
It's bizarre.
yeah. And I guess it also highlights the importance of, if you are suffering from OCD, or you suspect that you have OCD, it's so important to go and speak to an OCD specialist and get some proper help, because if you do go to the wrong kind of person who is not an OCD specialist, then you might not find the help that you need. So
yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. What are you hoping? I mean, you've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but what are you really hoping that people will take from the film?
Well, yeah, like I was saying, that the goal with the film was to inform while entertaining. So I suppose two things would be a better understanding of OCD, which, getting the reactions from people that have seen it, on the festival circuit, and through audience research that we've conducted as well, we find that the vast majority of viewers do come away from the film with a better understanding of OCD. Sometimes they come into the film, they knew nothing about it, or they just had a very twisted perception of what it might be. They come out of the film, they have a completely different view of OCD, or maybe they know somebody that has it, and then now they kind of have a slightly better understanding of what that person is going through. But then, I suppose, to use a kind of a slightly lofty term, in terms of like the artistic aspect of the film, I'd also hope that people watch the film and enjoy it as a piece of filmmaking. They enjoy the story, the characters, the style in which it is made, and perhaps it would be a film that they would watch more than once, rather than some, you watch some hand-wringing, dreary issues movie, you see it once, you endure it,
Yeah, yeah.
But hopefully, for want of a nail, isn't something that you would endure. You would actually enjoy watching it,
Yeah.
and then learn a little something about the condition at the same time.
Sure. And where can people go to see it?
Well, the film is coming out on February the 21st. It'll be coming out through the charity OCD Action.
Yep.
In order to keep up with things to do with the film, you can follow us on Facebook. So that's facebook.com/FWOAN. You can also follow Oak Hill Productions on Twitter. So follow us that way.
Fantastic. Final question. If you could give one piece of advice to people with OCD, what would it be?
Well, there's all sorts of advice you could give. But, I suppose one of the hardest thing, I suppose, is beginning to talk about it. That very first step in talking about it. So I think you've got to find that first step that suits you. So for me, it was writing this film. So that was through a creative pursuit, and then through doing it, you then start talking to people about it, and you talk to more people about it. You talk to other people with OCD about it. You start, maybe opening up to family about it. Then because the more you talk about it, the less of a secret it is. The pressure cooker, starts coming down. So I suppose it's like if you could find somebody, it's either somebody in real life, maybe it's somebody online. If you could find somebody to just begin talking about it with, somebody that isn't going to like, oh, what OCD? Oh yeah, I'm a little bit OCD too. Not somebody that has that kind of reaction, but somebody that can actually listen to it honestly. Maybe an OCD group somewhere online, perhaps. Because these things can be very difficult to actually physically speak about. Sometimes it's easier to write about it on your computer, but just that first step of beginning to talk about it, and then you take another little step, and then another little step. You start talking about it to other people in person, which it can be a scary thing to do. I mean, when we were doing the workshop with the volunteers, we had a little circle with some of the actors, and it was the volunteers and the actors, and I was in there as well. And we went around the circle, telling them about our personal experiences with OCD. And of course, just the way it went around the circle, and I was the last person to talk. So it was like the sand was draining out of the timer, and then finally it comes to me, and there's all of the kind of the tension. Oh my God, I'm going to say the wrong thing. Is it going to be a big log jam of words that comes spewing out? But then it was really interesting, because one of the actors during that workshop came up to me and said, "Oh, is this whole thing, is it triggering you? Is it causing you anxiety and stress and all this?" And I said, "Actually, it's quite the opposite. It was actually there was a sense of relief.
That makes sense.
Talking about it and being in a group of people that understood it, that knew what you were going through. They, you had OCD aspects and themes, as you say, in common with each other. So this was like a good thing. It was like, oh, you're not alone. You don't have this big secret, that has to be kept at all costs. You can, it's, when you do start talking about it, then the pressure valve gets eased down, so that's the thing. It's finding that little first step and just beginning to talk about it and then build up from there.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think that's some really good advice. And if you're listening at home and you're thinking about speaking to somebody about OCD, hopefully that's inspiring, and that will give you some confidence to go ahead, because you're so right. When you're in an atmosphere where things are open and you're able to speak about everything that you're experiencing and going through, that is the first step in getting better from OCD. So excellent. Nick, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting to talk to you, and I wish you the best for the film. I really hope it goes well.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Well, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed it today. To find out more about the film For Want of an L, you can go to oakhillproductions.co.uk. Remember, if you want to know more about me, you can check me out on Instagram, Robert James Coaching UK. You can go and join the Facebook group if you like, the Robert James Coaching Anxiety and OCD Support Group. And also you can check out my website, www.robertjamescoaching.com. Many thanks. And now just a quick reminder of my disclaimer. Any information that you view on my website, Instagram page, Facebook group, or anywhere else online, or any information that you listen to on the podcast is for informational purposes only, and is not intended to be a substitute for actual medical or mental health advice from a doctor, psychologist, or any other medical or mental health professional.